and that's the final report that is issued to the covered entity. So you can only see the findings of the audit in the final report, and if you have to, then start preparing a CAP, a corrective action plan. So now the final report will give you two choices. If the covered entity agrees with the final report, then a covered entity must submit a corrective action plan to HESA within 60 days of receiving the final report. If you disagree with the findings in the report, then you must notify HESA in writing within 30 calendar days of receiving that letter with supporting documents as to why you think those findings were not accurate per your 340B program. Now, after the audit, if a covered entity fails to submit a corrective action plan, it could actually be removed from the 340B program. And if some of the findings include a diversion, then there might be a requirement to repay some of those rebates back to the manufacturers. Again, the cap is to make sure that we have future compliance, but if you are audited, the same errors are not continuous and they need to make sure that we submit the cap. Although there is no requirement at this time regarding implementation timeline of a corrective action plan, HESA does want entities to establish a framework with a definitive end time for the corrective action plan. Once HESA reviews and approves the corrective action plans, covered entities with diversion or duplicate discount findings are required to provide HESA a public letter which will be posted onto the OPA website. So this is very, very important to know. So if you are an executive director of an organization, it is your name that's going to be on that letter, almost admitting the audit findings that we found for your 340B program. So this really goes back that the program compliance, the tone for compliance have to be set from the top, because if the leadership does not take control of the audit and compliance structure of the 340B, they're the ones that will be required to have a letter that is published almost admitting the non-compliance, and it's not really good for an executive to have that letter published out there. So HESA does not, HESA closes out the audit after the corrective action plan and the letter has been sent. Covered entities whose findings involve repayment, as I suggested, will be subject to an audit the following year. So if they see that especially diversion is the main issue, that the 340B drugs were given to non-eligible 340B patients, then you'll be required to pay back the discounts that you get. But in addition to that, you'll be subject to audit again the following year. Again, the results are used to create tools and resources for covered entities, and you can find this on the HESA website. So just to cap off, I've mentioned some of this already. HESA no longer issues preliminary reports to audited covered entities. HESA notifies audited covered entities about their findings in the final report. The entity's opportunity for notice and hearing to be provided to them, either to disagree or to agree with the final report, will come after. Formal exit interviews no longer take place for 340B audits. Now, now that we understand the structure, what are some of the best practices? You need to make sure that you develop very robust, comprehensive policies and procedures for your program. You need to make sure that you have concrete methodologies of conducting internal self-audits. For the group that I work with, we almost come with a checklist of every month. This is what we check for to make sure that we remain compliant. Conducting routine internal corrective action plan. If we made an error, how do we correct it, and how do we make sure that we document that within our policies and procedures, make sure that that's not repeated again. So the most common findings that you see is diversion, which really goes to patient definition and providers, and duplicate discounts. So I'll provide a little bit more detail on these two. Let me start with duplicate discounts. So again, a duplicate discount occurs when a drug that is purchased upfront for a 340B discount is also credited on the back end for Medicaid rebate. So that means the manufacturer have technically paid two discounts for the same exact drug. So that's duplicate discount. So let me give you two examples. I'll provide additional examples. I won't go into them, but I'll just walk you through these two examples of duplicate discounts. So number one, if a patient receives 340B medication, let's say they got the prescription from an outpatient procedure, then medication is billed through the pharmacy billing system, and then the NDC level data from that pharmacy is transmitted to the Medicaid agency, and the Medicaid agency realize, oh, this patient has a Medicaid insurance. The Medicaid agency will then submit that same NDC level claim information to the manufacturer for a rebate. So in this case, the drug was bought on 340B, which means the clinic or the covered entity get a 340B discount. And at the same time, the state Medicaid agency submitted a claim to the manufacturer and also get a rebate. That's an example of a duplicate discount. I'll give you a second example. A patient is administered medication by an outpatient procedure provider. And let's say this is a drug such as Prolia, which is an injectable, where patients actually go into the clinic to get the drug. Then the medication is billed through the hospital clinic billing system. And the NDC level data, again, is transmitted to the state agency. And then the state agency submits the same NDC level data to the manufacturer for a rebate. In this case, the clinic bought the drug that was dispensed internally on a 340B and got a discount, a 340B discount. And the Medicaid agency also went on and asked for a manufacturer rebate, which is also now a duplicate discount. I have two more examples here of duplicate discounts, but you can go over at a later time. Again, now, the issue of trying to understand billing Medicaid for your agency and whether you are going to be prone to duplicate discounts or not really goes back to how you register onto the OPA. So initially, the 340B entities must decide when you're registering an organization whether or not to use 340B drugs for Medicaid. Okay? If you decide not to bill Medicaid, you are going to select that on the OPA or HESA website where you are registering, in which case you cannot bill 340B drugs for Medicaid. But if you do decide to use 340B drugs for Medicaid, that's what we call carve-in. The other option is called carve-out. Then those 340B entities must decide how to bill Medicaid in a way that is consistent with the state Medicaid programs. So again, so number one, you could do an all-inclusive rate, or there's a specific policy regarding managed Medicare, or there's another one for traditional fee-for-service model, and you could look at all this. Okay? So you really need to understand how your state, what is your state policy regarding billing Medicaid. I'll just go a little bit more into this. Again, the Medicaid exclusion file, that is where you put the Medicaid ID number that's going to pull the 340B prescriptions that are sent through this. So most of you use a ship-to-bill-to arrangement, in which case the drug is shipped to the 340 to the contract pharmacy. If the entities 340B purchased drugs are not used to fill Medicaid prescriptions, if that's how it's done, or the other side, Medicaid prescriptions will fill using contract pharmacies' own inventory. So you're completely carving out, you're not mixing it up. Again, this is additional information regarding Medicaid exclusion files, just understanding the back end of duplicate discounts. This is where I was talking about when you're actually registering in HESA website, where you get the option to choose whether you are carving in or carving out, whether you bill Medicaid or not. This is where you find it. Again, this is really specifying the responsibilities of covered entities and state agencies in avoiding duplicate discount.